I hope you're doing all right, guys. I'm Nathan. This is Walk It Off, and today I'd like to talk to you about this one right here, The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris. Let's check it out. Alrighty guys, so Sam Harris is a name that you're going to hear an awful lot on my channel. I've been following his work for, I reckon I first started reading his material in high school. So he is a neuroscientist that studies the effects of meditation on the brain at a physical level. So he gets people like monks to go into a meditative state inside of a MRI machine and studies what's actually happening in their brain on a physical level. And he's also a big proponent of using stuff like psychedelics for healing stuff like post-traumatic stress syndrome and things like that, and how they can be more thoroughly used for beneficial activities as opposed to just recreation. And anyway, he's got a way of speaking in which you will either love him or hate him. He dives quite deep on a lot of philosophical topics, and while I don't think this is his best work, it is still very, very interesting. So Sam does a lot of work in the area of critiquing religion. Now, that's probably going to ruffle some feathers the wrong way, but I think it's important because there are some pretty, how can I put it, pretty big dismissal of some pretty terrible behaviour when it comes to religion. And while I do think that there is some good to be found in it, there is also a lot of bad, like the Catholic Church and the protection of certain peoples that do things to children is just, seriously, come on guys, really, you can do better, a lot better. But anyway, in The Moral Landscape, Sam talks about what are morals and ethics, but systems of behavior and ways of kind of keeping each other in line with our behavior in order to bring out the best for people. Now, what Sam speaks about for the most part is how we can extract the good things from religion and move on, essentially. And that he asks a lot of questions like, are things like morals, is harm wrong because God says so, or is harm wrong and therefore God agrees with it? Which I think is a really interesting take, and it makes you think about, okay, what are these foundational behaviours and where do they come from and things like that. Essentially what this book is an exploration of what science can say about morals and ethics. And I think this is actually really desperately needed in the 21st century. There are a lot of people who get their foundational behavioural beliefs from, chicken scratchings on parchment from 2,000 years ago. And while some of that, that's a big maybe, might still be relevant in today, most of it isn't. Like, I don't think we should be burying people up to their necks and stoning them for things they've done wrong. I don't think that's a good way of approaching it. So it was David Hume who famously said that you can't get an ought from an is. But Sam argues to the contrary here, in that the is that we all have is it's the well-being of human beings, and clearly there are oughts that should, things that ought to happen in order to bring about the most well-being for a human and humanity at large. So another topic that's going to come up quite a lot is the idea of what's called the hedonic treadmill, and it ties into Maslow's hierarchy of needs quite significantly, in that your dopamine cycle is something that gives you anticipation. It rewards anticipation, and effectively, I believe there's been studies where if you remove the dopamine feedback loop, it is actually possible to completely get somebody, or a being, to stop eating. I'm pretty sure they did this in rats. Not sure how I feel about animal testing, to be quite honest, but it is what it is. And yeah, the idea of the hedonic treadmill is that when you are only going for things that make you happy, you will need a bigger amount of them. And this is where people get into drug addiction quite easily, in that you need an ever increasing amount to stimulate that response in your brain. So you just keep going after what makes you feel good in the moment until you can watch people destroy their lives over this without even really noticing until they're neck deep in shit, unfortunately. So there are a few really, really interesting chapters in here on psychopathy, but they are extremely harrowing and not for the faint-hearted. There is a section where Sam goes over the court proceedings of a child serial killer, and they are very graphic, and I could barely stomach listening to it myself. So just, you may need to take some breaks with this one. It is very, very full on, but they are important topics to read about, so you should definitely give them a go. So some of the topics that Sam covers in this is, what is the in-group, out-group mechanism? What is altruism, and how can we explore it as human beings to benefit all of us? Does intention matter when people get hurt? And he explores it a little bit in this book in the matter of determinacy. Now, if you've not heard that topic before, essentially it is exploring whether humans have free will or not. And Sam doesn't think that we do, and he has another short book titled Free Will, in which he explores it more thoroughly. I've recently come across the idea of super determinacy, which is essentially, if you knew the speed and location of every atom, you could pretty much map the entire future history of the universe from the Big Bang to past now and on into the future. I'm not sure how much I agree with that. There is obviously a certain amount of complex, chaotic mechanisms in the universe that can manifest in all kinds of different crazy shit. So another big part of this book, and I quite like the discussion of these, is the area covering cognitive biases, and there's something that you're going to hear come up in my work quite a lot, in that essentially they are blind spots in your mind which you have to be really aware of to overcome them. So a really classic one is that you will unconsciously, when you're researching things, you will unconsciously go looking for things you already agree with, and this gets everybody, and you have to work really, really hard to overcome it yourself. So you have to read material that you completely disagree with. Alrighty guys, this one is definitely for anybody that is really into philosophy. I very much thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a great companion to ones about stoicism, like the ego is the enemy and stuff like that from Ryan Holiday. Great companion to that. But like all of Sam's work, this one is very good. It's not his best, but it is still very, very good, and I very highly recommend it. Yes, definitely not one for younger readers, and just be warned, there is some pretty triggering material for anybody that gets triggered by abuse and things like that, especially the sections on psychopathy. Not for the faint-hearted. But yeah, overall, I very highly recommend this one. You should definitely get to reading some of Sam's material or checking out his podcast. His podcast is called Making Sense, and I'm pretty sure it's available on everything. Anyway, thank you if you watched this far. I'm Nathan. I think you should definitely check out The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris. This has been Walk It Off, and remember, take care of each other, go outside, get better, be awesome. See you next time, guys.